Hello, everyone. This is your professor once again, Professor Danny Kabulay, on the course Accounting Information Systems. And we're now in the new year, 2022. So, first and foremost, I'd like to greet everyone a very happy new year. I just hope that your 2021 has been productive and happy. But for 2022, my wish for all of you is that I hope all of you will stay healthy, happy, and productive as well. So let's begin our lesson for this new year. Our very first lesson will cover chapter 4, which is the revenue cycle. I'm going to cover this chapter into two sessions. So this is part 1. So this is video lecture number 6, the revenue cycle. So in this chapter, I hope that you'd be able to learn and be familiar with the following: the various tasks performed in the revenue cycle, regardless of the technology that you're using, meaning high tech, that means you're automated, or low tech, meaning you are on a manual system. I hope that you'd also learn the functional departments in the revenue cycle and the flow of revenue transactions through the organization. You'd be able to learn also the documents, journals, accounts needed for audit trails, records, decision making, and financial reporting. The risk associated with the revenue cycle and the controls that reduce those risks. And then operational and control implications of technology used to automate and re-engineer the revenue cycle. So if you follow the PowerPoint that I've given you, so you would notice in slide number 3 that you always start with the customer making a sales order. Okay? Di ba kung minsan yung mga customer mag-order sila online, or they will place an order through the telephone or through email or in person. So when they place an order for a particular item, so the employee jots down the order of the customer. So it could be inputted in the computer or filled out in a form called the sales order form. Then the next step is that the customer is served. No? So the customer may pay in cash or maybe pay in advance or COD. Those are the terms. Or maybe the customer enjoys credit. That means papautangin natin siya. So meron siyang 15-day credit, for example. So after 15 days, saka lang niya babayaran. Or maybe the person can pay through his credit card. Okay? Step number 3, we start to transport the goods. Okay? We ship the item that was ordered. So if you're ordering from the likes of Lazada or Shopee and what have you, you're probably familiar with the term shipping. Okay? So after the goods have been shipped, no, you start to bill the person. If the person is paying in cash, as in COD, there's no problem. Your account has been converted into cash. You are already liquid. You received cash. The company has received cash. So the bill is completely settled. However, if the client or the customer is paying through credit, that means may credit line siya, pinapautang natin siya, babayaran lang niya yan sa takdang panahon. So kung ang kanyang credit line ay 10 days or 15 days, dun pa lang niya babayaran yan. If he will avail of the period, no? The credit terms, ika nga. So sometimes they will pay earlier than the credit terms. So if you're giving the person credit for 15 days, they can pay earlier if they choose to. And that is better for cash flow, right? Then, once we realize that the customer has not paid upon reaching the credit terms, 15 days, we start to issue billing statements, reminders that they have to pay. Up to the time that nakakatatlong letter na tayo, hindi pa sila nagbabayad, so we start to send what you call a demand letter. Okay? So medyo strongly worded yung demand letter because we are now requiring them. Otherwise, we can impose penalties, okay, such as interest or surcharges for delayed payment. Okay, same thing with credit card. If they don't pay their credit card on the time, then they are actually charged interest by the bank, right? So the final step is that you're able to collect. Then the whole revenue cycle is completed from the time the customer places the order up to the time that the customer gets to pay. If the account is not yet settled, that means there is an outstanding balance. The revenue cycle is not yet completed. Okay? So, kailangan maunawaan natin yon as accountants that the revenue cycle ends with settlement. Okay? So, let's look at an example. Mercury Drugstore. I'm sure during the Christmas season, everybody was, celebrating with their loved ones, family reunions, meeting up with friends, okay? Or maybe online or virtual celebrations. But of course, the cold season is here, so it is understandable that people will be getting sick once in a while, especially after the holidays with the holiday fatigue and pagod na pagod tayo sa paghahanda, sa pag-aasikaso ng mga bisita, going out with friends, especially now that prior to Christmas, medyo nagluwag ang ating restrictions ng government. So, the malls were filled up again, the restaurants were fully booked, and so are the hotels and other places of leisure. So, it is expected that after the holiday is over, many people will get sick. And that's exactly what's happening now. The flu season plus the surge of the coronavirus via the Omicron variant and many other reasons why people get sick. Okay? So, it is going to be expected that there will be a high demand for products on flu-like symptoms like colds, cough, sore throat, fever, fatigue, etc. Okay? So, let me give you as an example. Mercury. Naku, the last time pumunta ako sa Mercury, mahaba ang pila. Okay? At nagkakaubusan ng mga gamot. Okay? There's a shortage. So, with that, so when people place an order, for example, a company places an order with Mercury Drug, a huge list of medicines for its employees because they're trying to fill up their first aid kit, their clinics. Companies have clinics, right? How do you get them? So let's look at the journal entries here. So the billing department prepares a journal voucher, accounts receivable, debit, and then sales, credit. Okay, that's going to be the entry. Now, for the inventory control department, they prepare a journal voucher that says cost of goods sold, debit, and then inventory, credit. Bakit? Siyempre, yung halaga ng bibilin ng kumpanya, i-debit mo siya. Yun yung cost of goods sold. That's the expense portion. Okay? And then, yung asset mo, yung inventory, kailangan bawasan mo siya. Kaya dapat i-credit. Okay? On the other hand, sa billing department, nag-post tayo ng accounts receivable kasi merong utang sa atin yung kumpanya. Marami silang in-order. Okay, let's say 80,000 worth of medicines. Okay? And then, of course, you recognize the revenue. So, credit sales. Okay? Finally, once you receive the payment of the company after, let's say, 2 days, 3 days, so now, for cash receipts, you prepare a journal voucher. The journal entry would be debit cash, credit accounts receivable. So you're reducing now the accounts receivable because you extinguish it by means of payment. It's been paid already in cash. Okay? And then debit cash because that's an asset that is increased now upon receiving the payment from the company. So as easy as that. Of course, sa mga retail outlets like Mercury Drug, Watson's, Generica, etc., the generics pharmacy, etc., everything is on cash basis unless you have a credit account with the store. Okay? Now, let's look at the revenue cycle databases. Well, there are many different kinds of files. You have the master file. So when you talk about the master file, nandyan yung customer master file. So nandyan yung listahan ng lahat ng naging customer ng isang tindahan o ng isang company. Accounts receivable master file, ito naman yung listahan ng mga nagkakautang, may utang sa company. So ito yung mga dapat singilin. So if the account has a zero balance, that means yung customer na yon wala nang utang. Pero pag meron siyang debit balance, that means meron pa siyang babayaran. Pero makakakita ba tayo ng mga files na may credit balance? Yes, possible. That means meron silang refund. Okay? They overpaid. Okay? So, yan yung ating pangalawang master file. Then we have the merchandise inventory master file. So, lahat ng paninda ng isang tindahan o ng isang kumpanya, nandun siya sa master file. So, ito lahat yung ating mga binibenta. Okay? So, it's possible that some of these are out of stock. That's why we have to use a good inventory system so we will never run out of stock, especially of highly in-demand items. Like ngayon, panahon ng flu season. So, dapat we should stock up on inventories of flu remedies like cough syrup, cold tablets, and then paracetamol, okay, and then medicines for sore throat, etc. Okay, then there's what you call transaction and open document files. So this would be the sales order transaction file, and they include open sales order and transaction file. And then you have the sales invoice transaction file. So lahat yung mga billing statements. You know, sales invoice is basically billing. Parang pag tumanggap ka ng bill ng Meralco, yan, that's a billing statement. Okay, sales invoice. Kung sa tindahan yan, sales invoice, no? Pero sa mga services like the way Meralco would serve us, you will receive a billing statement or statement of account. Okay, SOA. Cash receipts transaction file. So ito naman yung listahan ng mga, ito yung file ng mga lahat ng mga nabayaran na. Okay? Mga tinanggap nating pera. And then the other type of files or part of the database would be other files, no? So this could include shipping and price data reference file, credit reference file, salesperson file, sales history file, cash receipts history file, accounts receivable reports file. So, mga other reports na yan na importante rin. Okay? So, now, if you look at the detailed flow of data of sales order processing in slide number 7, it looks a bit complicated, but it should be simple because it shows you the flow from the customer all the way down to the record. So how are the processes and transactions being recorded in the different files? Okay, so you try to look, you just try to follow the arrow, and you will see that this flowchart is not that complicated after all. So you will notice that may pinupuntahan lahat ng mga aksyon sa accounting department. Okay, so when you start to receive the sales order, to the time that you receive payment, to the time that you determine the mode of payment rather, and then to the time that you deliver the goods, until the time that you start to make billing statements, up to the time that the bill is finally settled. So it ends there. Okay? So it will end with our general ledger, our inventory records, and when you talk about inventory records, may subsidiary ledger yan per account. Okay? And then pagdating din sa general ledger, pinupost natin dyan yung transactions as well as sa ating mga receivables and other items that we need to post. Okay? Now, in a similar fashion, if you're using a manual system as indicated in slide number 8, you will know that it's also similar, except that the symbols used are different. So based on the flowchart, we know when a document is generated or a particular function is performed. Okay? So there are also decisions that need to be made. So just follow the flow, the arrow, and you will notice that from sales all the way down to credit, billing, warehouse, and shipping, the flow of transaction is systematic. Okay? So you try to develop something like that in your projects, and you will be able to come up with a flow chart a system flowchart for a particular transaction. So in this case, it's the sales ordering process. Okay? It's a similar story for slide number 9. Now, let's proceed to slide number 10. The sales ordering process basically begins with the customer placing an order. The sales department captures the essential details on a sales order form. The transaction is authorized by obtaining credit approval by credit department. Take note, hindi lahat ng customer bibigyan natin ng credit line. Una, tinitignan natin yung background ng customer. Siya ba may capacity to pay? Ang kanya bang organization ay stable? Okay? Liquid? Okay? Dati na ba natin silang customer? Or were they referred by a valuable customer? So those are some considerations we have to look at. Okay, will we be able to have a sustainable relationship, business relationship with this company? Okay, so those are things that we have to consider before granting credit line. So make sure na wala tayong nakikitang red flags. Example ng red flags, halimbawa, itong company na to, marami pala siyang kaso, no? Na hindi siya nagbabayad ng kanyang mga pagkakautang. Bakit mo siya bibigyan ng credit line? Okay? So, ibig sabihin, masasama ka lang dun sa listahan ng kanyang mga pinagkakautangan na hindi niya binabayaran. So, that would be losses on our part. So, you should not be giving this person or this company a credit line. That means they have, does it mean they cannot transact business with you? No. They can still transact business with you, but on a cash basis. But you don't give them credit line. It's risky, okay? Then a possible red flag is that if a company is noted to have a reputation of not paying on time, as in laging delayed magbayad, let's say, nabalita mo na nagbabayad naman sila, kaya lang matagal. It takes 6 months, 10 months bago ka nakakakolekta. Well, your money will be idle. Ibig sabihin, matutulog yung pera mo. Pag pinautang mo siya, matagal kang makakakolekta. So that means dapat mahaba ang PC mo. Okay? So, do you want to take that risk? So that's why when you have clients like that, the credit line is not long. Like you don't give them 30 days or 60 days. You give them 15 days credit. Okay? That should suffice. And that's a red flag kapag meron siyang history na matagal siyang magbayad. That is something that you might want to think about. Kung papautangin mo ba siya o hindi. Kung papautangin mo siya, up to how many days pwedeng umutang. Okay? So they have to settle the bill after the credit terms. If you like to give incentive, like you can give a 2% or 5% discount if they pay within the credit period, then that's up to you. No? That is an incentive for early payment, and that's good for cash flow. Okay, then let's go back to our sales ordering process. Then the transaction is authorized by obtaining credit approval. So it is the credit and collection manager who gives that approval after a very comprehensive background checking or credit investigation. Okay. Sales information is released to the billing department, the warehouse department, so stock release or picking of the ticket, and shipping for packing slip and for shipping notice. Okay? So remember, tatlong pupuntahan yan, yung information na yan, sa billing department para alam nila sino ang kanilang sisingilin, sa warehouse para alam nila kung anong i-label nila dun sa kargamento, dun sa produktong i-deliver, and shipping department so they can deliver it to the correct person or company. Okay? Now, the merchandise is picked from the warehouse and sent to shipping. Stock records are adjusted. The merchandise, packing slip, and bill of lading are prepared by shipping and sent to the customer. Shipping reconciles the merchandise received from the warehouse with the sales information on the packing slip. The shipping information is sent to billing. The billing department compiles and reconciles the relevant facts and issues an invoice to the customer and updates the sales journal. Information is transferred to accounts receivable and inventory control. Accounts receivable records the information in the customer's account in the accounts receivable subsidiary ledger. Inventory control adjusts the inventory subsidiary ledger. Billing, AR, and inventory control submits summary information to the general ledger department, which then reconciles this data and posts to the control accounts in general ledger. So if you look at the detail of flow of data of the sales return procedure, makikita natin na, di ba kung minsan may mga customers, they will return items that are possibly defective, or they changed their minds, or there was an error, okay? So the process is that the customer returns the item, but we have to prepare the return slip, okay? So copies of that are distributed. You have to approve the credit memo because you have to do a credit on the accounts receivable account. So para mabawasan yung pagkakautang ng customer na yun, kasi nagsauli siya ng isang merchandise, ng isang item. In the meantime, yun din ay magiging kabawasan sa ating sales. Sales returns and allowances is a contra account to the sales account. Okay? So that will be posted in your sales journal. Now, meanwhile, your accounts receivable records need to be updated. The subsidiary account, okay, the subsidiary ledger pertaining to that customer has to be reduced, no, because nagsauli siya ng item. So yung kanyang accounts receivable balance will be reduced by the amount that has been returned. Okay? So take note, dalawang records ang apektado dito, ang accounts receivable ledger at saka ang ating inventory at saka ang ating sales journal also. So tatlo pala. No? So yung inventory, babalik yung ating inventaryo. So you have to debit inventory. Okay? So, and then credit mo yung cost of goods sold. Okay? So let's look at the journal entry here. Okay. So in the general ledger, debit, inventory, control, debit, sales return and allowances, and then credit, cost of goods sold, credit, accounts receivable. Okay? So, dalawang item yung dinidebit natin at dalawang item din yung ating kine-credit. So, if you look at the details of the flow of data for cash receipts procedure, notice that the customer, they issue a check sometimes, or sometimes they will pay in cash. Okay? Or sometimes they will have other modes of payment. Okay? So if it goes straight to the bank, well and good, it's a bank-to-bank transaction. But if they issue cash, then we have to also do several entries, no? Like for example, the settlement of the account and the remittance, no, of the particular fund. Okay, so the flowchart for cash receipt system is a little bit complicated in slide number 17, but it's actually very easy because you start with the customer purchasing, and then the customer pays the amount. So there's this remittance advice or remittance slip. So you have to pay, this amount to the cashier, and an official receipt must be issued. In the Philippines, we're very strict on that. We need to ask for an official receipt every time we make a purchase, right? So establishments must be ready with their receipts booklet, no? So because they have to issue an official receipt for every purchase made by customers. If you don't issue an official receipt, the Bureau of Internal Revenue will call your attention. Okay? So notice the flow from receiving the cash and how it affects accounts receivable. It reduces your accounts receivable. And then in your general ledger, it affects some of the accounts there also. Okay. And finally, for the controllership, the bank balance is increased by the deposit made. Especially nowadays, when people buy items online, they pay either through GCash or through bank transfer. Either way, it affects the bank records. Okay? So notice that there are many modes of payment in this day and age. Now, so let's look at the cash receipts process. the customer checks and remittance advices are received, and then the mailroom clerk prepares a cash pre-list and sends the pre-list and the checks to the cash receipts. Cash pre-list is also sent to AR and the controller. Now, when it comes to cash receipts, you have to verify the accuracy and completeness of the checks. Tama ba yung binabayad? Tama ba yung amount? Okay. Updates the cash receipts journal. Then you prepare a deposit slip. Then you prepare a journal voucher to send to general ledger. Accounts receivable post from the remittance advices to the accounts receivable subsidiary ledger. That means periodically a summary of the postings is sent to general ledger. Now, when it comes to the general ledger, you reconcile the journal voucher from cash receipts with the summaries from accounts receivable. Update the general ledger accounts control, and then the controller reconciles the bank accounts. So you can do a bank reconciliation to check that all the deposits have actually been received in the bank. Now, can you guess what's missing in the previous flow charts that I've shown you? There's something missing. You got it right. Issuance of the official receipt. Napansin nyo ba? Walang item doon na nagsasabi na you have to issue an official receipt. So whether you are in a computerized or manual system, you need to issue an official receipt. In the Philippines particularly, the BIR is very strict on that. Now, I'll give you an example. Nagbiyahe ako minsan papunta sa Orion, Bataan, from Manila. Okay? So sumakay ako ng ferry, the marine vessel Starlight Juno, dyan sa may CCP complex, okay? Sa may MOA complex. And nung sumakay ako, nagbayad ako, okay? I told them where I want to go, and they gave me a seat, okay? They assigned to me a seat, and they gave me my ticket, my ferry ticket, okay? Look at the picture. There is the from the Bataan Integrated Transport System, they issued me seat number 11H, okay? And at the same time, they issued to me my official receipt. So this is an example of a service rendered and an official receipt was given by the service provider. Okay? The Bataan Integrated Transport System. Okay? So, yun ang kulang sa nakita ko. You see, itong American book na ginagamit natin, very attuned to US system. So I don't know how strict they are in the US, but in the Philippines, we're very, very strict on issuing official receipts. Okay? Now, let's look at the summary of internal controls. Now, we will look at the control activity, the sales processing, and then the cash receipts. So notice that when you look at transaction authorization, okay, so the credit check return policy, and then remittance list, pre-list is important, no? So, para malaman natin kung ano yung mga na-receive na cash, no? Importante yung segregation of duties also. Sa ano mga control points natin dyan? Okay? Sa sales, credit is separate from processing. Inventory control is separate from warehouse. Accounts receivable subsidiary ledger is separate from the general ledger. When you talk about the cash receipts, anong control point dyan? Okay? Cash receipts are separate from AR and cash count. Okay? Accounts receivable subsidiary ledger is separate from the general ledger. Now, so when you talk about supervision, so we are going to, the control point there is in the cash receipts. So sa mailroom separate. Okay? Accounting records. So what are the control points here? Sales order, sales journal, accounts receivable subsidiary ledger, accounts receivable control or general ledger, inventory subsidiary ledger, inventory control, sales account. Okay? They're all separate records that we need to consider. And then the control in cash receipts is that the remittance advices, checks, remittance list, cash receipts, journal, accounts receivable ledger, accounts receivable control, cash account, they're all separate also. Okay? Distinct. Now, access, who has access? Physical access to inventory is restricted. Access to accounting records, okay, is restricted also. And then cash receipts, physical access to cash. So this has to be safeguarded at all times. So yung ating mga cashiers, nakalock lagi ang mga drawers nila, okay? Especially when they leave their post, okay? Independent verification, shipping department, billing department, general ledger, you can do an independent check on each of these three. Now, control on cash receipts, general ledger, and bank reconciliation. You perform this activity to make sure that all cash that are meant to be received are in fact received, okay? There could be delays, so you put you take note of that, no? Yung tinatawag natin na outstanding checks, okay? Na-receive ng check pero hindi pa na-deposit. They're in, or deposits in transit, okay? That's possible also. Nag-issue na tayo ng check pero hindi pa siya nag-clear sa bangko. So those are the things. So there are certain time differences or time lags, okay? You need to consider that when you do your bank reconciliation, okay? Now, so when we talk about authorization controls, proper authorization of transactions documentation, that is, should occur so that only valid transactions get processed within the revenue cycle. Authorization should take place when a sale is made on credit, that means it's authorized, a cash refund is requested, okay, that means it's authorized also, posting a cash payment received to a customer's account, that means they are on the cash pre-list. Now, when you talk about segregation of functions, there are three rules. Transaction authorization should be separate from transaction processing. Asset custody should be separate from asset record keeping. That means yung taong nagre-record at yung taong nagtatago ng asset na yon ay magkaiba. Okay? The organization should be so structured that perpetration of fraud requires collusion between two or more individuals. Nagkutsabahan sila. Okay? So, we will have an exciting case later, no? Still on segregation of functions, sales order processing. Credit authorization, separate from SO, sales order processing. Yung nagbibigay ng credit at saka yung nagpo-process ng mga benta, ng mga orders, dapat magkaibang tao. Inventory control, separate from warehouse. Okay? Accounts receivable sub-ledger, separate from general ledger control account. Now, when it comes to cash receipts processing, cash receipts should be separate from accounting records. Accounts receivable sub-ledger, separate from general ledger. And when you talk about supervision, often we use, this is often used when unable to enact appropriate segregation of duties. Okay? So halimbawa, maliit lang yung company, okay yung segregation of duties pag marami kang tauhan at saka malaki ang volume ng mga transactions, no? You can afford to hire more people. Paano kung maliit lang yung company mo, like you're a small or a micro enterprise and you're a jack of all trades? Isa lang ang tauhan mo. Siya yung nagtitake ng order, siya rin yung gagawa ng produkto, siya rin yung magde-deliver, siya rin yung tatanggap ng pera. Di ba ganun usually sa mga tindahan? Mag-isa ka lang. You're in complete control of all the transactions. So, importante lang na mayroon nagsusupervise. So, when you supervise that person, that means you are checking that no fraud is in fact occurring. Okay? So, yun yung control. Okay? The supervision. So, that means when you talk about larger companies, you probably need less supervision because you know that there is segregation of duties. Okay? So supervision is intensified when segregation of duties is not possible. Okay? Supervision of employees serves as a deterrent to dishonest acts and is particularly important in the mailroom. No? For example, yung mga, pagkasabing mailroom, yun yung place where you receive cash. Okay? Kasi sometimes the payments are delivered through checks. Okay? Now, when you talk about accounting records, with a properly maintained audit trail, it is possible to track transactions through systems and to find where and when errors were made. Pre-numbered source documents, special journals, subsidiary ledgers, general ledgers, and files. Now, when you talk about access controls, access to assets and information should be limited. With the revenue cycle, the assets to protect are cash and inventories. Access to records such as accounts receivable, subsidiary ledger, and cash journal should be restricted. Now, when you talk about independent verification, physical procedures as well as record keeping should be independently reviewed at various points in the system to check for accuracy and completeness. Shipping verifies the goods sent from the warehouse are correct in type and quantity. Warehouse reconciles the stock release document, that's the picking slip, and the packing slip. Billing reconciles the shipping notice with the sales invoice. That means yung sales invoice, yun yung pinapadala natin sa customer, at saka yung shipping notice, yung ating i-deliver, ay tugma. No? You're delivering the right item. General ledger reconciles journal vouchers from billing, inventory control, cash receipts, and accounts receivable. Now, we have an exciting case for you. Look at this picture in slide number 29. Can you guess what is this? Yeah, this is a speaker. It's a product by Philips, a world-renowned brand on gadgets, okay? So let's look at this case called the Untallied Sales Book. Hero is a promodizer at Philips, a popular brand of electronic gadgets and accessories. The process at the store is as follows. Step 1, customer purchases an item from store. Step 2, promodizer tests the item and customer witnesses proof of quality. Step 3, promodizer prepares the sales invoice. Step 4, customer decides on mode of payment, maybe cash or credit. Step 5, customer settles payment at cash counter. Step 6, the item is deposited at the releasing section. Step 7, cashier receives payment and issues official receipt and claim stub. Step 8, the customer presents official receipt and claim stub at the releasing section. Step 9, promodizer hands over the item to the customer. You see, this is very simple, but problems could still arise. At the end of the month, ideally, the sales recorded in the computer, that's as per books, should match the sales recorded by the store or stockroom as per inventory. Okay? So yung nabawas na inventaryo, yun dapat yung sales mo na dapat nagtutugma dun sa naka-record na nabenta mo sa computer kasi dun nagbabayad ang mga tao. Nire-record yung cash receipts sa computer. Okay? For the month of December, computer records revealed that 8,695,000 worth of gadgets were sold during the month. Meanwhile, the inventory records revealed that 8,734,000 pesos worth of gadgets were sold during the month. So what is the difference? Okay, can you check the difference? There is a difference, right? Anong difference natin? So, why is this happening? Identify one possible reason for the discrepancy. Mas malaki daw yung nabenta based on inventory records kaysa sa dun sa computer records. Okay? How can such discrepancy be avoided? Limit your answer to 2 to 3 sentences only. Take note ha, 2 question yung sasagutin nyo. Identify what is the reason for this discrepancy. Bakit kaya nangyayari to? Okay? Tapos pangalawa, ano ang solusyon? How can you prevent or avoid such discrepancy from happening based on the identified cause? Okay? Don't forget to answer in the comment section below this video. So that constitutes your recitation and your attendance, your very first recitation for 2022. So stick around and I'll post later on the second part of chapter 4.